Welcome to the Freethinkers Living Sober Group's workshop on varieties of secular experience, navigating AA in a secular way. Today, we were going to be pleased to introduce Jeffrey Munn, but as most of you heard already, he had a little mix-up in his calendar, and he emailed me about 45 minutes ago and said he wasn't going to be able to make it unless he did it by phone, and asked if we could postpone. So we're going to wing it, because after all, most of us are able to do that. You know, on the last Sunday of each month, we have a different speaker panel. Well, today we're going to have a panel of about 100 people. And would someone care to read an excerpt from Bill Wilson's address for me to start us off?
I'll do that, John.
Okay, thanks, Kat. Just a second, let me get it up here. Is it up for everybody?
Yep.
In AA, we are supposed to be bound together in the kinship of a universal suffering. Therefore, the full liberty to practice any creed or principle of therapy should be a first consideration. Hence, let us not pressure anyone with individual or even collective views. Let us instead accord to each other the respect that is due to every human being as he tries to make his way towards the light. Let us always try to be inclusive rather than exclusive. Let us remember that each alcoholic among us is a member of AA, so long as he or she so declares. That's from Bill Wilson's 1965 address to the General Service Conference.
Thank you, Kat. Appreciate that. So, like I said, we're going to have to do a little bit of winging here. I do want to remind everyone this is sponsored by the Freethinkers Living Sober Group. And as freethinkers, we aspire to open-mindedness and to appreciating the sharing of others, particularly those with whom we disagree. We ask only that everybody share without attempting to dissuade or argue or disrespect anyone else or their beliefs. As a group, we are secular. That is, we don't endorse or oppose any system of belief. We don't have a quarrel with any form of religion. We also don't use prayers of any kind in our workshops or our meetings. Our only wish is to assure suffering alcoholics they can find sobriety in AA without having to accept anyone else's belief or having to deny their own. So I'm going to kick this over to Joe to talk a little bit about what we're going to do. And then we're going to open it up for sharing or questions or answers or whatever you guys want to talk about. So Joe, you want to take it away?
Sure. A couple of quick little ideas. I'm Joe. I'm an alcoholic and a happy customer of Alcoholics Anonymous, a member of Beyond Belief, Agnostics, and Freethinkers AA group on Zoom from Toronto. A meeting from Toronto. Used to be a classroom in the University of Toronto. Now it's it crosses many more borders. And so I thought, because we're all in this situation, I was just on a short road trip where I got to see a hybrid meeting that I'd been to as a Zoom participant, and I got to go there in person. Some other groups that are sort of reopening and some people who are staying very loyal to Zoom. I thought we should have a discussion about our groups, best practices, our own shared experiences of what works, what challenges we're having. We might be able to share some ideas in terms of security protocols, what's best. Our group is having a problem with multiple Zoom admins. We have many people who open up our group from different parts of the world, and Zoom wants to double authenticate people, and then they want to do that in our beyondbelieftoronto@gmail.com, but Gmail wants to double authenticate people, so it's making it very difficult for we want to get as many people involved as possible, of course, in hosting and chairing the meetings. of sort of delegating these things out, and then, sort of last minute phone calls, we can't get in, we're locked out, and that sort of thing. I'd love to hear if anybody else is having problems along those lines and have found a workable solution. That's our own bad experience. And so I've come to this panel of experts for help. But I'm going to just read a couple of short excerpts from the AA group where it all begins. And it says a lot of things that are what I consider a good read. As the long form of tradition 3 clearly states, our members ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover, nor ought AA membership ever depend upon money or conformity. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together for sobriety can call themselves an AA group, provided that as a group, they have no other affiliation. Further clarification of the AA group may be found in the 12 concepts of world service. I'll post a link the whole thing can be read online if you want. It really helps if you're having sleep problems. But concept 12, warranty 6 says, no penalties to be inflicted for nonconformity to AA principles. 2, no fees or dues to be levied, voluntary contributions only. 3, no member to be expelled from AA. Membership always to be the choice of the individual. 4, each AA group to conduct its internal affairs as the members wish, it being merely requested to abstain from acts that might injure AA as a whole. And finally, that any AA group of alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided as a group they have no other purpose. So, and then it goes on to talk about special purpose groups, and we know about special purpose groups. There are our agnostic atheist groups, BIPOC groups, Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQIA. I've been to meetings that were just for doctors or just for lawyers or just for airline pilots. There's members of Congress have their own AA meetings. There's all kinds of different sort of special purpose AA groups, but they're a group if they say they are. And one interesting thing I talked about there, because this would be interesting to talk about in terms of how it applies in our digital world, should an AA group let the public know how to obtain information on open AA meetings? Some groups do, but for only one reason, to let the community know of our availability for help for alcoholics through our program. Such small notices are usually placed in community centers and in local newspapers to let people know or get in touch with a nearby AA meeting if they so desire. A typical notice might look like this: facing a drinking problem? Perhaps Alcoholics Anonymous can help. Write blah, 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 address, weekly meeting open to the public at such and such a place at such and such a time. Some groups keep lists of members available to do 12-step work. Groups may have hospital committees or greeters to make sure no new member, visitor, or inquiring prospect goes unwelcomed, ... So that's a whole other topic. My group has been talking about, what about outreach? When we were in our U of T classroom, we often got faculty, we got students, medical students would come and see us. There were nursing students, psychology students. We were just down the road from the physician's assistance program for doctors and other people in healthcare who had problems with alcohol. They were interested to hear about this sort of secular approach to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was great that we could be there for kids students, young adults interested in finding out more about AA. In the U of T building that we met at, there is probably about 20 AA meetings, but most of them are closed. We were one of very few open meetings where we could engage with members of faculty and students and the general public. And so how do we do that in a digital era? Should groups spend money on like Google ads or Facebook ads or search engine optimization if they have a web page? All of those things, there aren't any rules about them because it's up to the groups, of course. There's some guidelines available, but if you're doing anything like that, I would love to hear about it. How tight should security be at your Zoom meeting? Do you make it, what's the goal? To make it as comfortable and safe for the regulars or as easy to find for the newcomers? And sometimes there are trade-offs in trying to accomplish both of those things. And every group that I know of has had to sort of have a conversation about what their priorities are going to be. I mean, we've been at this 3 years. We don't have any people with 10 years experience with running Zoom meetings for AA. But we are the pioneers and we are the future experts. And I would love to hear from people about what their group struggles are. Are you getting service fatigue? Are you still engaged with hospitals and institutions? Are your members divided about in-person versus Zoom versus hybrid? I think these would be some great things to just sort of throw it open on, and we can share our experience and our struggles, and maybe some other people will have some ideas. So I'm just kicking it off as a wide open general subject, our AA groups, how we're doing, what we might be able to do to alter or improve, how we engage with the general public, how we engage with AA as a whole, and how the Zoom era has affected our group. You might have never been to a face-to-face meeting, and I'm not saying they're better or worse, but I think it's not an either or, it's a yes and sort of thing. I know why Zoom serves the needs of many alcoholics better than face-to-face meetings, and I know why face-to-face meetings serves the needs of many alcoholics better than Zoom meetings. And I've been to some hybrids that have worked very effectively. Others, where they're still trying to find their best practices, trying to find their legs. So I'm sorry I'm not Jeffrey Munn. But he will be here next month if you're just sort of clicking on. We had a breakdown in communications. So Jeffrey Munn, who was going to be talking about his book, Staying Sober Without God today, has been deferred to August 28th. I hope you can rejoin us for that. And I am going to turn it back to our moderator and ask you to throw up your hands and let's have a discussion about our AA groups. Thanks.
And I might add, if you have other things that you want to add about the meetings, Zoom meetings, secular AA, you might keep it fairly brief. We've got 100 people in the room. And remember, this is being recorded, so you might want to keep anonymity in mind by using maybe just your first name or such like that. Let's start off with Carol and Catherine. I don't know which one wants to talk.
Hi, I'm Catherine. For those who are fairly new to AA, especially in the have only gone to Zoom meetings, John, could you explain what the difference is between an open meeting and a closed meeting is?
Sure. Generally, an open meeting means anyone can actually attend. Generally, the meetings will say that some of them will say only those who identify as alcoholics can speak, but people are welcome to attend them. closed meetings are generally meant to be only for those people who identify as alcoholics. That's within Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, some secular meetings are a little bit more liberal than that. So you have to check with the individual meetings because we're all autonomous. Does that suffice for you, Catherine?
Yes.
Okay, Jenny? Massachusetts?
Hey, I'm Jenny. I'm an alcoholic.
Jenny?
Here we go. So I just had a suggestion or one solution for the Zoom double authentication problem. One solution I've seen is that the secretary's role changes. The secretary becomes the person who's responsible for making sure that the room is open. So once that secretary gets through the various hoops, then that device is recognized and that secretary keeps the role for, more than a month, several months, or longer. And then at that point, then there's a handoff. That's one solution that seems to be working for making sure the room can get open. And then that secretary, depending on how much that person or the group wants, could also monitor the Gmail account since they have to get access to it anyway, make sure that people can get in. So yeah, I guess it's a little bit changing job responsibilities. Because then the secretary doesn't have to be the host and it doesn't have to be the recruiter if it's a speaker meeting. It's just, and it also doesn't have to be the Zoom. The person can hand over co-hosting responsibilities once the meeting is started or on, or once others are there. Okay, just thought I'd share that.
All right, thanks, Jenny. John?
Hi, John, alcoholic.
Hey, John.
I go to 4 Zoom meetings at this point, and the 2 of them are straight ahead, we agnostic meetings, and the other 2 are traditional AA step study meetings. And you wouldn't even think that they were the same program. It's like a completely different point of view and attitude, and not just in the language of, not using the word God, but just in actually how to work the program. But coincidentally, I started AA back in the early 80s, and I used to go to Charlie Polachek's meeting in Los Angeles. It was one of the first We Agnostic meetings. And I found the same difference back then. That was like, I don't know what, 30, 40 years ago. And there would half the meeting would be, we don't read the big book. It's it mentions God, and so we don't even look at it, and we don't read the steps or anything. We just go to meetings and share our feelings. And the other half of the meeting was kind of like myself, which is sort of a half breed of like myself. I was born an atheist, but I've adapted to traditional AA. Anyway, this takes me back to my first meeting. I was back in the 70s, I was an electronic troubleshooter, and I saw the steps on the wall at my first meeting. Of course, I was horrified to see God there, the word mentioned, but yet I saw that, well, wait a minute, there's a clear separation here between beliefs and between action. And that became my whole premise of the AA program, is there's belief and there's action, and you simply separate the belief from the action, and you do the action and maintain your the same beliefs I had, like an atheist, with scientific beliefs, and I don't know, that's worked for me all these years. But I still see that same division in meetings. Either we're we agnostic and we just talk about our problems, or a traditional step study where we actually talk about specifically. Now, let me just one more thing, as I today can go through the big book and understand. I can take any sentence in the big book and explain it to an atheist. In fact, sometimes in a traditional believer meeting, you can speak an atheist philosophy, and they don't even know they're getting the atheist philosophy. There's a way to mince your words and to explain things in a natural way rather than, you know, with a supernatural way. That's enough for me. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Kenji.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kenji, addict alcoholic, human in recovery here in San Francisco. And I put a note in the chat, which some of you probably read, that where I was saying we should consider being pretty cautious about discussing security protocols in this venue because it could empower the people that like to mess up our meetings intentionally. But that said, okay, let me not go with that said. Let me go a different direction here. You know, I find it so fascinating that that Zoom meetings in the mainstream world and the secular world have diverged in a very interesting way, which is geographically. For instance, if I were looking for a Zoom meeting in the mainstream world, I would go to my local intergroup site, and I would see Zoom meetings around in my 2-county area here. But if I'm looking for a secular Zoom meeting, I will go to one of 2, or actually there are probably 4 or 5 different sites that are worldwide in nature. And so we've diverged in completely away from geographical limitations in the secular world as far as Zoom meetings. And I find that so fascinating. And I'm not sure what that bodes for the future, if anything. I personally am a big fan of pure Zoom meetings. I have been to hybrid meetings that worked okay technically, where I could hear and see all right, but there are ways in which we're 2 separate shells that kind of, it's like a Venn diagram where we overlap, but before the meeting and after the meeting, we totally separate. And I find that frustrating for connection. So I really like this, where everybody's willing to turn on their camera, is face forward, and I get to see everybody, and I get to hear everybody well. I think this offers a lot for people who have hearing or sight disabilities, especially now that Zoom has added closed captioning. That worked very well. Originally, to turn on closed captioning also turned on the transcription element, where you could save a transcription of the entire meeting, which seems like it violates confidentiality pretty severely for people who are able to save everything that everyone said during the meeting. But now those 2 things are not locked together. You can have closed captioning without the transcription part. And that really opens up meetings. I don't know how many people are aware that it exists. I see we don't have it turned on here, but it's something that the host sets up, and then people can opt into on a meeting by meeting basis. And it seems to be very accurate, providing somebody has a decent mic. The closed captioning is about as good as it is anywhere else that closed captioning is offered. Anyway, that's probably enough out of me. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Kenji. Dave.
Hi, Dave Alcoholic here in central New Hampshire. Just thought I'd touch a little bit on my local experiences with meetings, particularly as it relates to the transition through the pandemic and the effect on them. So my traditional home group is a fairly small Thursday night round robin discussion group, and when the pandemic hit, we pretty quickly shut down and went to complete Zoom and lost a lot of people. I mean, at one point on that Zoom meeting, we were I don't know, maybe no more than 6 people at a meeting, but we're all close friends and really tight. So it kind of worked for us. But you know, it really impacted things like, you know, collecting seventh tradition contributions and that sort of stuff. At one point, when things started to open up a little bit, there was a lot of push to get back to in-person meetings, but there were a number of us that were reluctant because of the pandemic, because of COVID to actually, you know, get back to a face-to-face in-person kind of thing. So we tried doing hybrid for a while. And it was interesting that, I mean, the thing with hybrid was that there's a real requirement for technology in order to be able to support it. And I don't just mean that somebody could start Zoom, all of that, that's kind of technology requirement, but it also required microphones that could pick up what people in the room were saying. So we had to have somebody go out and get a nice microphone. You could sit in the middle of the room, you know, with a USB connection to a laptop that had to be in the room. And really to make it effective, you needed to have a fairly large monitor. I mean, you know, this guy that helped set that stuff up had like a 28-inch monitor, which was okay. But when you've got a room full of people, you know, trying to look at it, you know, the Brady Bunch thing, 20 of people on a 28-inch monitor, it gets pretty sketchy. So I would guess that for hybrids to be successful, there really needs to be a significant investment in technology and then also a person to run it and a backup for that person. You know, if there's one guy that knows how to get this thing started and set up and running, what happens if he gets sick? What happens if he goes out? You know, there needs to be multiple people that can step in and take over. And that's really was kind of the death knell of the hybrid experiment that we had. Was, you know, the guy who was doing the technology just got sick of having to be there every single week to set up the technology. I mean, he worked full time. He was really busy, and sometimes it was just real hard. So we ended up going back to just a face-to-face meeting, and you know, one of the interesting results of that was, you know, as all of the traditional groups in the area, and there's quite a few in between Concord, New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire, there's quite a, and in the outlying towns, there's quite a few meetings, because not all of them opened up again, and because some of them were still on Zoom. You know, we started seeing more people showing up at our meeting because people were looking for face-to-face meetings. And oh, guess what? This little meeting in Chichester, New Hampshire, was face-to-face. And so, you know, and people came in and liked what they experienced, and so as a result, we've ended up being a much better attended meeting, and it's much more interesting with a lot better sobriety. So it's been, you know, on the whole, that transition's been a pretty positive thing for us. I just, you know, so kind of a comment. I go to some Zoom meetings today. You know, one of them is there's another group in town. There's a step meeting that used to be a big face-to-face step meeting, and you know, again, Zoom happened, or the COVID happened, and you know, went to they started up a Zoom meeting, and then at one point, most of the people wanted, or a lot of the people wanted to go back to face-to-face, but a lot of the people didn't, and so we ended up with two separate meetings, but one group, you know, meeting at the same time in two different places, you know, one on Zoom, one in person, and that's been working pretty good, except what I've noticed is that the Zoom meeting is slowly but surely shrinking in favor of people going back to the face-to-face meeting, because it's a local group, and you know, there's some advantages, I think, to, at least in my experience, with a face-to-face meeting versus Zoom. I mean, I love Zoom meetings. I love being able to connect to, you know, a huge bunch of people from all over the world. You know, to be able to find meetings of particular types that just aren't around here, like, you know, secular meetings. We have no face-to-face secular meetings in this neck of the woods, and the only way that I could find and get connected with secular AA was through Zoom meetings, and I really love that. But in a face-to-face meeting, you know, I can show up early. I can help set up the room. You know, I can have conversations one-on-one with specific people. Whereas, you know, in a Zoom environment, you have this kind of group chat thing that happens after the meeting, which is fun, but it's not the same as, you know, meeting up with your sponsor and grabbing your sponsor and hauling them off into a corner for a particular, little question thing, or just getting together with a couple of people that you've got some things in common with and having a chat. It just seems much more personal in a face-to-face situation than it is in a Zoom situation. So I think there's always going to be that kind of balance. And lastly, just to kind of comment on Kenji's comment about Zoom for secular versus Zoom for traditional. I think that's probably has to do with the fact that there's tons of traditional meetings around, but there's not a lot of face-to-face secular meetings unless you're in particular urban areas like San Francisco or LA or New York or maybe Toronto. Here in backwoods New Hampshire, there's not much. So you're not going to see the local area listings of meetings containing Zoom meeting information for seculars because there aren't any. So the only place to find them is on those big websites. And until secular is growing, probably I would guess in the future you're going to see more of those face-to-face meetings, and so that may change over time. But for now, that's kind of the way I've experienced them anyway. So
All right.
that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that I've been teaching online for a number of years and was fairly conversant with Zoom already and with multimedia and that kind of thing. And so it was quite natural for our group to just go ahead and start Zoom meetings. The unfortunate part was that for a couple of years there, I was it with one other person doing one meeting, and then we've been trying to have more people run those meetings. So what we ended up having to do is make a second account in Zoom, and we have an email address that is dedicated to our group, so that we have several people who access it and are able to keep up with it. And that's the account that has the second Zoom account, so that they can host. And the problem was deciding how to get people to what was the best way to have volunteers do it. And we went back to the old way that we used to do it in AA for a long time, and that is having secretaries, or what we call co-leaders, at the meetings for 6-month periods. And we'll see how it works out. But so far it seems to work out pretty well because we have 4 meetings a week. So that's a number. And I don't want to have to be at every single one of them and do everything. And I'm not anymore. So that was kind of cool. Don, speaking of co-leaders, Don helped out a lot on that meeting.
Thanks, John. I may look like a bit of an ink spot. Oh, I do have some light on me. And you're going to be wobbling around because I'm holding my iPad. But anyway, I am Don. I am an alcoholic, and I'm coming from Toronto, Ontario. Yeah, I've been involved with Freethinkers Living Sober in Cottonwood for almost 2 years now, and I became introduced to them through the Emotional Sobriety series, workshop. So anyway, Zoom and other meetings. I belong to a traditional group here in Toronto. I've been a member of that group for a good 12 years now, and I have no intention of leaving it. I am an atheist or an agnostic. You can call me what you want, but I'm certainly not in the religious camp. And but I'm in the traditional group because I like the people who are there, and it turns out most of the people in the group just happen to be agnostics or atheists. So it doesn't matter. People talk about God and other people never mention it. And it all works just fine, because just as John has some opening words at the beginning of meetings about how we should be rather tolerant about what we of others when we're in meetings and learn from them. And that's what we're about. We're all there for one purpose, and that's to get sober. Stay sober. That's, I guess, 2 purposes. But that's the way we see it. We went on to Zoom about a week after the shutdown here in Toronto in 2020, in March of 2020. And I had not a clue about Zoom, but I sent an email to a bunch of people and I said, I'm starting a Zoom meeting and here's how you get into it. I don't know how I even figured that out, but anyway, and to my surprise, about 15 members of our group showed up the first night. And so we have a Zoom meeting. We took no vote on it. We had no business meeting to decide this issue. It just happened. And I think that's the way a lot of AA should work, is there's too bloody many business meetings and not enough people just saying, Jesus, something has to be done and I'm going to do it. Anyway, so we got the Zoom meeting going. The one thing I've found about the Zoom meeting from my home group here in Toronto is that just the Zoom meeting is the kind of problem John is mentioning. I have not missed a single meeting of my group since we went on Zoom, which is just as well because I have health problems that sort of limit my activities. And anyway, so I opened the meeting with, just opening the meeting for Zoom, going on and saying, Zoom, open this meeting for us. And but what we did right from the outset was I didn't take on all the responsibilities. We have somebody else chair the meetings. And we have one open meeting a month, which is a speaker meeting, and the rest of our meetings are closed discussion meetings, and it works well. The only place we, quotes, advertise, close quotes, the meeting is on the Toronto Intergroup website. And I set up an account, an email account in the group's name. And if people want to come to our meetings, they can phone me, and they will, they email me at the traditional group, and I will send them the details for logging in. Recently, I wanted somebody to chair the meeting, look after the whole thing for me, because I didn't think I was going to get to the meeting. And this double authentication thing bubbled up. And luckily, I was available to get the meeting started. But I think that's, just luck that I was available. Otherwise, there would have been people out in the dark. So I guess what this says is, you got to think about procedures ahead of time, which I haven't, and which our group hasn't. And that's really important. So we've got to get a couple, 3 people who can at least get the meeting open. And I think that's fairly easy. We'll get it. I will open a meeting. I'll give them the details for opening the meeting. They'll then be asked for the double authentication. It'll come on my iPhone. I will just send them a text message real fast. They go on. And after that, as far as I know, they're authenticated forever on that device. So it should work fine. What else can I say about it? Our group also has an open meeting on Friday nights, every Friday night. And as other people have noted, the attendance hasn't been the best. We used to get about 20 people. Now we're getting about 8 people on our Friday night meetings that are open in person. But we're still getting 15, 16, 17 people on our Zoom meetings. And I've got this nasty habit of rating the Freethinkers Living Sober Group for speakers. And it has really added to the mix in terms of getting a wider group of people with different ideas about AA and how to practice it, which we just didn't have access to before. And with the Wednesday night people who go to the discussion meeting, we've pretty much discussed it informally and have agreed that we should stay online. We have people who attend regularly from upstate New York, Ajax, Ontario, which is not far away, but further than you'd want to drive every Wednesday night. And we have another couple of people who live far out of Toronto, and they wouldn't be able to meet you. And we have two people who have never attended an AA meeting, period. And I met them through the Freethinkers Living Sober Group. They're Canadians. And so I've got people who I met in Arizona who have become my sponsees here in Toronto. And I think Zoom is amazing. I want to go to open meetings at our home, at our church where we meet, but I also want to stay online. And I'm going to participate in the Freethinkers Living Sober Group in Cottonwood for that very reason. I do every Tuesday night with them where they have a closed discussion, an open discussion meeting. So I've rambled on for too long. I hope people might have found that somewhat useful, and thank you for letting me participate.
Thanks, Don. I want to mention also that Zoom keeps changing the rules. So you have to stay on top of it, because we didn't have this problem a year ago. It was a new thing that they're doing to try and make the Zoom meetings more secure, I suppose. And Google the same way. Lindsay.
Hey folks, I'm Lindsay, alcoholic from North Carolina. So, you know, I've struggled with alcoholism for most of my life, and I've been in recovery, out of recovery, lapse, come back. I've been a part of the secular community in AA for some years, lapsed and come back. And, you know, I just, I have a computer science degree. I help where I can with Zoom stuff. It is so important for, you know, somebody who's struggling, for new people that are coming into recovery, to have that face-to-face connection. And I even find that as I continue, as I move forward in my recovery, you know, that's really the thing that keeps me going, is those people that are, you know, there, that are my friends that I can go have a coffee with. And it's very hard to establish those relationships solely through Zoom. You know, I do have good friends that I found in the secular community online, you know, wonderful people, but you know, and as supportive as the Zoom meetings are, as what a lifesaver they've been for us through COVID and everything, you know, it's I need more in the long run than just Zoom, you know. Kind of thinking about like grappling with new technologies and making things work and making things fit. It kind of, in my mind, I'm relating that to a new recovering alcoholic grappling with life, you know, and how does this fit? How does this work? You know, and for many folks, myself included, I feel that having that community resource is integrally important, you know, for people to find us and to maintain our recovery long term and bring about a change of lifestyle. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you all for sharing and allowing me to share.
Thanks, Lindsay. You know, I wanted to take a minute. I see that Mikey has come in, and he's been involved in a lot of these kinds of issues and problems and challenges with the meetings, and with Oh My God, he's been quite involved in Zoom and in person. So I wonder, Mikey, would you like to talk for a few minutes about your experience and the meeting lists and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Mikey. I'm an alcoholic. I love Zoom meetings only because we have people that have stayed sober specifically only on Zoom. We call them Zoom babies. And I think that's amazing. We also have people that come to our group. In fact, we had one last night that traveled up from Miami just to come to our face-to-face meeting, which is always just awesome to see someone that you've known on Zoom, and then all of a sudden you see them in person and it's like no different. You're like, oh my gosh, how are you? It's like they live next door. As far as the Zoom procedures, I think we have a pretty big group. We get about 100 to 120 people per meeting, and we meet on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'll post that stuff in the chat. But you never, we get Zoom bombed all the time, but no one ever sees it. Right now, there's probably about 7 different positions that we have to run our meeting because it's pretty large. One is a bouncer, and the bouncer stays on the very last page. And as people come in, one of their jobs is to look at their icon to make sure it's appropriate. And if they have a last name, they change their last name to their last initial. But what we do is we follow them in and we wait for their video to turn on. And if their video turns on and is something questionable, we can remove them immediately. Our security settings are set up so that there's only 2 things that a bomber can actually do. One is they can have a video background where they cover it like this, so all you see is their virtual background, but they have like a dirty movie playing. Or they can have an icon that has something questionable. But other than that, there's nothing else that they can do. And we've set that up through Zoom. And there's a lot of, if anyone wants to get with us separately, there's a lot of things that we can definitely share. As far as I heard you talking about the accounts, we have one Zoom account and we pass that. The backup dancer is the person that runs the meeting and the screen shares and everything. And that's different every month per meeting. So we have everyone just go in that one Zoom account. There's no other way to get in. And they have the controls and they assign co-hosts, but we don't have to have pass keys and we don't have to put out, switching all these different things. We're like uber organized, and the reason our meeting kind of went crazy, the pandemic forced us online, and then we just started adding silly things to it, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And as it got bigger, we wanted to get more people involved in service. So we made up these positions. Do we need them all? No. You could probably run our meeting with 2 or maybe 3 people, but we created all these different positions to get people involved. And I'll tell you, they become family. They become part of our community. We have a WhatsApp chat that we keep in contact, and we, schedule shifts for the meetings, and it really does do something amazing. As far as hybrid meetings go, I've been to a couple hybrid meetings that have been successful. There's one, Children of Chaos, that's really good. They have a clubhouse and they have a dedicated camera, and when the people in the clubhouse share, it zooms in on them, and then when someone one of the Zoom people shares, it comes up on their screen. But they are a clubhouse and have the money to do that. We currently are trying to get our area convention to be hybrid, and a lot of resistance is from people that just don't like change. They just don't like anything different or new. But there's a huge benefit to being on Zoom, not just like for service. We have people that if you ask them to come to a business meeting, or forbid you be at a convention and have to do service, there's no way they'll do it. But to roll over in their underwear and jump online and control the chat, they're totally okay with that. And it gets more people involved. As far as best practices, we are working on a list, and this is a group effort from a lot of different Joe's groups, worldwide secular meetings. What we found is that a lot of the lists have meetings that don't actually exist anymore. Most of those lists were during the pandemic, and they've gone back to regular meetings. So they have a listing, and what happens is a newcomer or anyone goes to the list, and then they get a meeting where they're the only one in the room, or the meeting never starts, and it's very frustrating. So what we did was we went to every single meeting on the list. And if the meeting didn't open, or if the meeting, the passcode was wrong or whatever, we took it off of our list. So the only meetings that are on our spreadsheet are meetings that are active. And every 6 months we go back through it, or we're going to go back through it and re-verify them, which is helpful. And it came out of necessity. We have one person who's actually in the room tonight that really had a horrible experience with going to meetings and not having anyone there. It got very frustrating, and she went on Google to find out alternatives to AA. And you know what that happens if you go to Google and you get AA sucks, and oh my God, you just need to moderate. So it was definitely something that we felt needed to do. And another thing that we've done is added a secular resources section towards the end of the spreadsheet, which has every book you can think of, podcasts, just all kinds of information. And we made cute little URLs to share them, and I'll post that in the chat as well. As far as Zoom growth, the nice thing, in my opinion, the nice thing about Zoom is that we have people that have never been exposed to secular AA, or that there's a secular approach at all. And they come to our meetings and they just feel like they can breathe for the first time, especially people that have been trying to stay sober in traditional AA and just haven't. So they find us and they're like, thank you. But what happens is it encourages them to start meetings in their local area. And I think that's the coolest thing about the Zoom meetings, and especially all of the different people that are coming in, is that it is a great representation of what we can do to stay sober in our areas and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? So some Zoom meetings, close, they're not right for people. Others thrive. I definitely think there's a place for both. Not a fan of hybrid meetings. They're very difficult. And if you don't have the right people, we also are very fortunate because we have a website, so we can do all kinds of neat tricks and stuff. But basically, that's all I have to say. And I will start posting those links in the chat. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mikey. I really
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Mikey.
And Mikey, if you didn't hear Mikey at our last Varieties of Secular Experience, it is posted. We now have a Buzzsprout page, and it's posted on there for the audio if you're interested. Janice.
Hi, I'm Janice. I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, every time Zoom changes something, it causes a problem, I swear. And I'm not an expert on Zoom. I did, with the help of some people in this meeting that went back in person. We decided, because we had people out from other places, including one person from Australia, that we would keep a Zoom presence. We are not meeting at the same time. We're meeting on the same night. So if somebody wants to come to Zoom, then they can still get to the physical meeting. Sometimes we have 10 or more people. Sometimes we have 3 or 4, and I set up my own account to do this. And I consider that my donation to the meeting. But I don't use Venmo, and I haven't set anything up like that. But the problem with the double authentication, I ran into that because before, I broke my hip in November, and I had to have somebody take over that meeting for several weeks. And, having my information, they could do that. If I go out of town, we could put somebody else in. Now we can't. The last time we tried it, we hit the double authentication. He said we couldn't, get in. So the only option for that is for somebody just to go in, but they won't have a host and that. And, so I haven't figured out what we're going to do for him when I'm out for 3 weeks in September. But The other thing, talk about what's going on here in Albuquerque and Rio Rancho in New Mexico. So a lot of groups have gone back in person. My home group has one of the other meetings I go to, but they're traditional, and I do have trouble with them. There's some I don't go to anymore because I do have a Zoom option. But my home group's a big book study. I think it's hilarious. But I got sober in traditional AA, and I can take what I want out of the big book and ignore the rest. I got sober on the traditional steps, and I'm not sure I could actually do it with any of the rational steps, because there's a lot of emotion involved with being alcoholic, I think. And I'm wishing there was something in between. However, so at my home group one time, and I was leading the meeting, and I don't remember what we were on. We were on one of the traditions. And then somebody who'd been coming for about 3 weeks hyped up and said, you have to get a higher power, and then I got somebody else who was totally Jesus. And so I said, I wish people would remember the third tradition of AA, that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. And the guy who made the first comment, are you talking to me? I said, no, I'm just looking out in space. So I ran him off. He hasn't been back. But I have another home group online, and I don't know if we ever get enough people back in the home group. There's only 3 of us right now. I may back out of it because I'm finding the new people who are coming, a lot of them are more religious than the people we used to have before the pandemic. And the people we used to have knew exactly where I stood, and nobody got really pissed about it. And nobody told me I had to believe in all that kind of stuff. I've been lucky nobody's ever kicked me out of a meeting for talking about there's another way to do this. And this, without a God. This is before I even found secular. But it can be a problem. Now, we have a Freethinkers group here that I started going to. They had gone back in person at the club, and then the roof fell in at the club. This is a pretty interesting story because it's the second location this has happened to them. So, it took about 8 months to find someplace else to go to. And so the meeting had been hybrid. We had a big screen, and it worked that way. But so it took me so much time to get back in person. I had another meeting a half hour later, so I wasn't going back in person. Only 3 or 4 people showed up, and it doesn't cost anything here compared to California or anything else, but it's $10 a meeting. And we're not, we're only getting money from people that live here, basically. And so we just went back to all Zoom. It just made more sense because people have gotten used to, I don't want to drive across town. Now, it's not as if Albuquerque is big enough that should be a problem. I have to laugh about it because I've lived in Houston and San Antonio, and it's like this place doesn't even know what a traffic jam is, no matter what they say. But you get used to it, and it's easier just to turn on your computer. So I suspect we'll stay that way. Now, one of the guys who's been working with Oh My God does some positions for them. His name is Marcus, and he lives here. And so 1st of June we started a agnostic meeting here, and we're having it in the park across from our central office because, well, we don't know if this is going to work, and we really can't afford to try to rent something at this point. We got on the schedule. We didn't have any problem getting on the schedule. We're going to be in the next newsletter. But it takes a while to get people. And we finally got someone 2 weeks ago. It's such a thrill. Oh, this guy's bringing this chair out of the cart. I think he's coming here, So we still don't know if we're going to survive or not. But until it gets, the weather here is pretty good. And then until about November, we can stay in the park. But there's only 2 meetings here in San Antonio that with that. There was only one with Freethinkers that are secular. So good deal of what I do is on Zoom, and I'm assuming it's going to stay there. And I'm not looking, to leave Zoom. But you do have, I get into problems with having too many service positions. And I've helped to move some other meetings, these California meetings we've had who've gone back in person, help them set up. And now it's assumed that I'm going to come every week and maybe lead every other week. And I'm trying to get them to understand that I'm willing to help. I can't do it every week. Anyway, that's all. It's good to see you all.
Thanks, Janice. Good to see you too. David.
Hi, guys. I just have a few things to say. I guess we're getting kind of a little bit late. I'm assuming this is 1 hour. I'm not sure. Anyway,
Actually,
I'm in
we're set to
Toronto.
go to 12:30, but we end early if we don't have anybody who wants to talk, and we are or late if we have people who want to keep talking.
Great. I'm in Toronto, and I'm finding that we're having a bit of a difficulty just getting the in-person meetings. The secular ones getting up and running again. Part of the problem too that happened is we've lost all of our meeting spaces basically. Just briefly, we were in the U of T 3 times a week. We were in 2 Unitarian churches, one on 2 separate in-person meetings in 2 churches in different parts of Toronto on Tuesdays and Fridays. Both those churches have been sold. We haven't really gotten clarity as far as getting back into the University of Toronto. We started a meeting at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto, CAMH. We were basically out of there, so we migrated everything into Zoom, but getting back in is getting to be a bit of a challenge. The 2 meetings that I alluded to that were in Unitarian churches, we've gone back to we found another location on a church. Actually, it's a good location. It's on close to the subway in Toronto, but it's I'm not even sure which denomination it is. It's an old Christian church, and just one of my concerns, I think, going forward is I would wonder how we're going to meet the challenge of maybe finding cheaper places to meet going forward. That's one thing. And I just personally, I'm grateful for the Zoom meetings, but there's something, when you walk into an in-person meeting, particularly, and I've done that just recently a few times after just being sequestered in my living space for 2 years with the pandemic, and it's just a different world. And I think I personally just get a lot more out of just being around people than I do when I'm online. And needless to say, there's a countless amount of security issues that you don't have to deal with when you're in in-person meetings. So I hope we can kind of get back to that, but it's going to be a bit of a slog, I think. And I just wanted to speak to a little bit about, I think I was the GSR for Beyond Belief through the pandemic over the past 2.5 years. And what I'm sensing is there seems to be really a disconnect between a lot of meetings and the GSR and the service structure in AA. I was at the last last online area assembly, Area 83, and I was just amazed at how low the participation rate is. Interestingly, online, I believe it was something like 15% of all of the meetings in Area 83, I believe it was only a 15% participation rate. And what I'm seeing is a growing trend, and I think it's a good trend that there seems to be more and more meetings that are becoming very specialty meetings. And I've been to a few of them where people are kind of taking the initiative to really try to create meetings for specific issues. We've seen it for a long time for some time in AA with meetings for women, meeting LGBTQ meetings, certainly the secular meetings. But one of the things that I think is a real potential possibility going forward, because of Zoom and because it's hard to get a group of people together for a specialty meeting when you're in just one physical space, because there simply may not be enough people interested in it. It's just meetings for people that are struggling with specific issues apart from addiction to alcohol, just medical issues. I mean, myself, I have a lot of trauma, and that's just been a huge part of my recovery, is to be able to find a place where I can talk about that and deal with that. And luckily, we do have a lot of tolerance in the secular community. I'm not sure that tolerance exists as much in traditional AA. From what I've heard, people there seems to be a lot more of a just a belief and an attitude that unless you're dealing directly with alcoholism, you're dealing with an outside issue and it doesn't belong in AA. So that's something that I find really exciting for the future. It's just, people that are willing to actually take that initiative to establish meetings around issues.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm just rambling a little bit here. So maybe I'll just wrap it up now. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it. I just wanted to mention, as far as the area and the service structure, we had a GSR and have had a GSR. We started our meeting in 2014, and we've had a GSR all along. There is a certain amount of reluctance on the part of some people in AA to recognize the reality of online, but I think that's changing. For our area, which is Area 3 in Arizona and some other parts of other states, all of the area assemblies are now hybrid. So they went ahead and spent the money to buy the equipment. We have the technological expertise to be able to do that. And I think that's kind of exciting. Now, the thing is, how do we incorporate all of these secular AA meetings that are on Zoom into the service structure? Because there are a lot of places that just don't want to have anything to do with it. Unfortunately, that's going to have to change, and it probably will, but it may take time. Randy?
I'm Randy, alcoholic.
Hey, Randy.
Glad to be here. I'm going to share from a little different angle here. My hat's off to all the people with the technological know-how to make Zoom work. I know very little about it, and I'm not likely to learn. I'm a traveling man nowadays, so I couldn't attend face-to-face meetings in a lot of places, but I usually can find an internet connection, and I love Zoom. I just wanted to mention what it's been like for me as somebody that's been sober for a good while. The difference between face-to-face versus Zoom, and the difference between conventional AA versus secular. I got sober in the middle of North Carolina, and after 5 years, I moved to Northwest Arkansas in the Ozarks. And about 8 years ago, I came to Arizona, and I found secular AA shortly after John and some other people started this meeting in Cottonwood. I was about 7 or 8 years ago. And I thought at the time, I was 25 years sober, that I was going to have to leave AA. I had no choice. I could not stand the religiosity of it. So finding secular was a lifesaver for me. It was almost like getting sober the first time, to not have to hide my disapproval of what was being said, and to have to make it a point of not holding hands and saying the Lord's Prayer. And the two places that I live, North Carolina and the Ozarks, were both super religious. And one of the things I love about the Zoom meetings, and we have people from all over the world, is the universality of it. I like to know that alcohol does its thing to you in Ireland and in Australia and in the Middle East, just like it does here. And it hitting bottom kind of looks the same in any language. And in a Zoom meeting, I don't think you could get this small, practically inbred community like I was around before, where you're trying to out-God one another and everything has to be a cliche. So in my mind, that's the difference between the secular versus conventional. I still go to a conventional meeting in the winter. I'm down almost to the Mexico border. There's some great people. It's outdoors. That's the only reason I went to this one face-to-face meeting, because it was around a campfire and I felt pretty safe about COVID. But I've gotten to where I just cannot read how it works. I can't do it. I can't do that ABC. I can't do the BC on the end of it. I don't believe that human power could relieve my alcoholism and that only God could. I think that human power did relieve my alcoholism. No one person with a human name, but a lot of kind drunks who have gone before me. As far as the Zoom versus face-to-face, the two places that I mentioned, and including Cottonwood, Arizona, the conventional Alano Club, they never acknowledged that COVID existed. They never stopped having meetings, and they didn't wear masks, and they didn't isolate. So, you know, denial doesn't only apply to alcoholism. I just don't like being around people that live in denial too much anymore. I love Zoom meetings. I have some people that I can see on the screen right this moment that I knew from 6 years of face-to-face meetings before Zoom. And I know that I know them well enough I could call them and talk to them about anything in the world. If I was starting out on Zoom and got sober in Zoom, I wouldn't have that connection. But if you see somebody on Zoom that you think you really have a connection with, get in touch with them after the meeting. And, you know, even if it's not in the same community, if it's all over the phone or texting, you can still get an intimate relationship with someone, whether you want to call it sponsee. But Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life in all of its forms. It got me to meet with other people who had stopped drinking themselves to death and allowed me to do the same. And I never thought I would live long enough to have white hair and be talking about, you know, how wonderful sobriety is, long-term sobriety is. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
Always good to see you, buddy. Is it Rady or how do I?
Yes. Thank you, John. Yes, Rady, recovering alcoholic, Cleveland. I mostly go to the West Side Agnostics meeting for the past 6 or 8 months. Yeah. Hi, Joe. Good to see you. I did want to answer one question that John brought up. My understanding is that aa-intergroup.org is organized, and by the way, they allow groups that are registered with them to have a delegate and an alternate delegate, but more importantly, they are working toward integrating online meetings with aa.org, so that like maybe a link will be on the aa.org website for Zoom meetings, you know, or not Zoom, whatever the online meetings. They're working with convention delegates. They have a presence. AA Intergroup, you know, has a presence at our international convention that happens every 5 years, and at area assemblies, those assemblies that allow them a presence. So that, I think, if anyone is interested in working toward making that happen quickly, more quickly or effectively, to get involved with aa-intergroup.org. They're the ones working toward that. Okay, but I did want to say congrats to Maggie and Heidi, our Zoom babies, and any other Zoom babies in the room. I have to tell you, I have sponsored on and off, you know, since I was freaking 18, and and I never really had a long-term relationship with any of them. I can't even think. The longest would be two months, 4 months, something like that. And then Zoom happened, and I picked up this sponsee. It was her very first meeting ever at our Zoom meeting, and she's still with me today. She just got her 2 years in May, and yeah, that's so surprising to me. And we meet on Zoom. We rarely actually talk on the phone. It's you know, that in-person contact, and despite my history with not sponsoring a lot, I have, since Zoom, I have 4 sponsees, and only one of them is local, who I've actually met in person. But even now, because he lives on the other side of town, we still just meet on Zoom. We rarely get together, because I don't like driving in my 20-year-old car. But and I just want to thank you all for this really interesting and informative discussion, especially on the security issues. That was very helpful. I pass. In fact, Mikey, it was your stuff, really, I loved. Thank you.
Thanks, Rady. Yeah, we, in our group, we also have a phone list that we keep. It's a phone and list with everybody's birthdays and all that. There are about 130 members. Anybody who wants to be a member of the group, they just give us that information and we keep them updated on everything. And that seems to help as well. And I really like sponsoring over Zoom, frankly. I hate the telephone. So it's really nice to have Zoom because I can see the person and we can talk back and forth. And I actually think I may start using the Jeff's book for sponsoring because I really like a lot of his approach. It's a lot of the stuff that I've been saying for years, but it was kind of going rogue in AA to sponsor people that way. But it worked for me better. So Mikey, you want to wrap us up here? I don't see any other hands.
Yeah, I just wanted to address two things that were brought up. First of all, the aa-intergroup.org. I posted the link in the chat. You can separate it by secular meetings. That is the AA online presence, and it's official. The other thing that I posted is the meeting guide app, and that app is amazing. It's location based, and wherever you are, you can just find where the nearest meeting is. And they have a secular, they do it by secular meetings as one of the filters, and that comes right off the AA website. So they are understanding that Zoom is an issue or is a growing thing. The other thing is about intergroup. We have a very good relationship in our face-to-face meeting with our service structure. One of our members is a DCM. We have a GSR. We go to the workshops. We go to area. So their intergroup, which is what that meeting guide is tied to, everyone's intergroup, we've got a good relationship with them, and they list our Zoom meeting on their site and on the meeting guide as a separate meeting. It's all about not manipulation exactly, but a little bit of finesse and talking to the right people and stroking a few egos. But the nice thing about that is that they feel comfortable sending their people to us, people that don't have a belief. They're like, you know what, why don't you check out Oh My God, that's a good meeting. They're here in Orlando. But those two resources, the problem that we find with the, just like in regular AA meetings face-to-face, is a lot of the meetings close and nobody tells anyone. And they're on both the app and that online one. There's just meetings that close and they don't tell anyone. So be careful, but those are two excellent resources, and they're in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks, Mikey. The other thing, keep in mind that is tied, the meeting app is tied to the local intergroups. So if your local intergroup like mine doesn't contribute, then it won't list your meetings. And although our intergroup does list our meeting as a meeting locally, and I actually am the one who does the spreadsheet for all the meetings that are on Zoom. So we get listed on that too. But you want to keep that in mind. And I want to put in a pitch for the service structure and for people getting involved as GSRs or DCMs, group service representatives. It's vitally important that secular AA get involved. I actually was able to change an entire committee's vote on something because they could listen to me talk about what secular AA is. A lot of people don't even know what secular means, believe it or not. And a lot of people think that AA is already secular. So it's really an important function. If your group doesn't have a GSR, if you're a local group, I recommend it. Kenji?
Yeah, hi there, Kenji, Addict Alcoholic. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add to what Mikey was just saying, that that somebody earlier was saying that AA.org is working on incorporating secular online meetings into their meeting list. Well, presently, I just went and looked. AA.org refers you to the online intergroup meeting list for meetings, and any meeting. So that list is very interesting. It lists meetings pretty much worldwide. If you type in the search box a word like secular or agnostic or anything like that, you'll only find meetings that have that word in the meeting title, in the meeting name. But there are all these boxes on the side of categories, and one of those categories is secular. And if you click that secular box, then you'll see all the meetings that have asked to be listed as secular meetings. And if your meeting isn't listed in that list, all you need to do is there's a form on there. You just need to tell them when your meeting is and what it is and what type of meeting it is, and they will include you. But there's also the option to become an intergroup rep with the online intergroup. And I have to say, even though I am one, I haven't really done the footwork to figure out exactly how it works, and that's a little embarrassing to say. But it's a very interesting resource, kind of in between our totally separate secular lists and the physical meeting, the face-to-face meeting lists. And it remains to be seen exactly how online secular meetings will eventually get represented in general service to the general service conference, from what I understand. But I'm sure that over time we will, if we want to be and if we work to be. Thanks.
Thanks, Kenji. Yeah, that's a
Thanks.
work in progress, and it takes a long time for Kevin.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kevin, alcoholic, and wow, what a great substitute. You know, thank you, Joe. Thank you, John, for coming up. This is a really informative session, and you know, getting to see that you know, you guys get to be, in my mind, sort of the grandfathers of this movement, or at least online. And you know, we're also getting that nice second generation of leaders coming up: Marcy, Marshall, Susanna, Annie, and you know, and AA is incredibly robust, and we'll be okay. It's going to call for changes and new things, but yeah, thanks for the all of these conference sessions, and this one in particular.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Well, I think we have beaten this dog about as badly as we're going to be able to. And I want to thank you all for pitching in and staying and making the comments you had. And if you, I think Joe might have just put it in the chat. If you want to save the chat, then you click on where the chat is and those three dots over there, and it says save file, save chat. And I think that'll work. It'll save it. Thanks, Joe. It'll save it in your documents folder under Zoom. I just want to post this one thing up here in the I can get the screen share to come up. Takes a while. I wanted to mention that opinions expressed here are those of the individual, except mine, of course. It should be yours. I'm kidding. What you have heard here was spoken in confidence and should be treated as such. If you consider what you've heard, you're bound to gain a better understanding of how to handle your day-to-day problems. These words are for you. Talk to each other, think things through with other people. Let there be no gossip or criticism, but only love, understanding, and companionship. And the way we like to end our meetings is by everybody unmuting and sharing together, if you want to, totally voluntary. Who is responsible? I am responsible.
When anyone, anywhere, reaches out for help,
I want
the hand of AA always to be there.
I am
responsible.
responsible.
I am responsible.
If I
Thank
have
you,
to.
everybody. Thank you,
I guess.
Joe, so much. Appreciate it.